My phone rang during our Tuesday morning production meeting, displaying an unknown number with a Phoenix area code. I almost ignored it, but something made me step outside the conference room and answer. The voice on the other end made my blood freeze. A collections agent from First National Bank demanded immediate payment on a $529,000 mortgage that was 30 days past due. The loan was in my name for a luxury condo in downtown Phoenix. I insisted I never applied for any mortgage, never signed documents, never even looked at properties. The collector read back my social security number, birth date, and employment information, all correct. My hands shook as reality crashed down. I sat in my truck outside the manufacturing plant where I worked as operations manager, trying to process what had just happened. The collections agent, a woman named Janet Morrison, had been relentless. She refused to believe I knew nothing about a mortgage for Unit 412 at Phoenix Grand Towers, a luxury high-rise I'd never even heard of. Growing up in Scottsdale, I'd always been the responsible middle child. My younger sister Jessica, now 28, had been our parents' golden child, despite never holding a job longer than 6 months. While I worked 2 jobs through college and graduated with a business degree from Arizona State University, Jessica dropped out of community college 3 times and constantly asked for money. I remembered our last family dinner 2 months ago at my parents' house. My father, Robert, a former sales manager with graying temples and perpetually worried expression, had leaned back in his chair and declared, "It's your duty as her big brother to help Jessica get on her feet." My mother, Linda, a petite woman who worked part-time at Nordstrom, nodded enthusiastically while refilling our iced tea glasses. "Family comes first, Anton," she had said, adjusting her reading glasses. "You should consider helping Jessica with a down payment for her own place. She needs stability to find the right direction in life." I had politely declined, mentioning my own savings goals for purchasing a house. Jessica had pouted, twirling her blonde hair around her finger and complaining that everyone expected her to live in some gross apartment forever. Robert had given me a disappointed look, the same expression had worn throughout my childhood whenever I failed to meet his expectations. Now, sitting in my truck with my heart pounding, I pulled up my credit report on my phone. What I saw made my stomach drop. The mortgage appeared alongside several credit cards ID never opened, a car loan for a BMW ID never purchased, and utility accounts for addresses where ID never lived. All accounts listed Jessica's Phoenix address on Camelback Road. My credit score had plummeted from excellent to poor. I scrolled through the fraudulent accounts, each one feeling like a physical blow. There was a Visa card with a $15,000 limit, maxed out. A MasterCard with $20,000, also maxed. Store cards from luxury retailers I couldn't afford to shop at, even with my decent salary managing operations for Southwest Industrial Solutions. The car loan particularly stung. I drove a reliable but modest Honda Civic, carefully maintained, and nearly paid off. According to my credit report, I apparently owned a brand new BMW 3 Series worth $45,000. The monthly payment alone would have consumed 1/3 of my take-home pay. I called my parents' landline, a number that had been the same since I was 12 years old. The answering machine picked up with my mother's cheerful voice asking callers to leave a message. I hung up without speaking, my mind racing with questions and growing dread. The 3-hour drive from Tucson to Scottsdale had never felt longer. I called in sick to work, something I'd done maybe 5 times in my 6 years with the company. My supervisor, Bill Henderson, expressed concern about my voice and told me to take care of myself. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent years building a reputation for reliability and responsibility, only to discover my family had been systematically destroying my financial life. As I drove north through the Sonoran Desert, past familiar landmarks like Picacho Peak and the Casa Grande ruins, I tried to piece together how this could have happened. My apartment in Tucson was secure, my mail delivered to a locked box. I'd never given anyone access to my personal information or financial documents. But then, I remembered small things. My parents visiting my apartment 6 months ago while I was at work, claiming they wanted to surprise me with groceries. My mother asking for my new address when I'd moved to a different complex, saying she wanted to update her address book. My father's questions about my job and salary, which I'd attributed to parental interest in my success. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. By the time I reached the outskirts of Phoenix, with the city's sprawling subdivisions stretching toward the mountains, I knew I was about to confront something much worse than a simple misunderstanding. My parents lived in a modest ranch house in an older Scottsdale neighborhood, the kind of place where retirees walked small dogs and teenagers learned to drive in empty parking lots. The house looked exactly the same as always, with its beige stucco exterior and desert landscaping. But parked in the driveway, gleaming in the Arizona sun, was a brand new BMW 3 Series. I sat in my Honda for several minutes, staring at the BMW that, according to my credit report, belonged to me. The car was pristine, with temporary dealer plates, and that new car smell probably still lingering inside. Jessica had always complained about driving her beat-up Toyota Corolla, a car our parents had bought her used when she turned 18. The front door opened before I could decide what to do. Jessica emerged wearing designer jeans and a top I recognized as expensive from my brief experience dating someone who shopped at high-end stores. Her blonde hair was professionally styled, and she wore jewelry I'd never seen before. She looked surprised to see me, but not particularly concerned. "Anton, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice carrying that slightly whiny tone I remembered from childhood when she wanted something. "We need to talk," I said, getting out of my car and walking toward the house. All of us. Inside, my parents were watching television in their living room, a space that hadn't changed much since I was in high school. The same beige furniture, the same family photos on the mantel, the same desert sunset painting my mother had bought at a garage sale 20 years ago. My father muted the television when he saw my expression. "Son, you look upset," he said, standing up and smoothing his polo shirt. "What's wrong?" I pulled out my phone and showed them the credit report. "This is what's wrong. Someone has been using my identity to open accounts, and according to the bank, I owe over $500,000 on a mortgage I never applied for." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went pale, and she reached for her water glass with a trembling hand. My father's jaw tightened, and he exchanged a quick glance with Jessica. "I'm sure there's been some mistake," my mother said weakly. "Identity theft happens all the time. You should report it to the police." "Linda," my father said sharply, and she immediately stopped talking. Jessica flopped onto the couch with an exaggerated sigh. "Look, Anton, before you get all dramatic about this, you need to understand something. We had to help me somehow. You weren't using your good credit anyway." The casual way she said it hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean, we?" My father stepped forward, his chest puffed out in the authoritative posture I remembered from childhood lectures. "We're family, Anton. Family helps family. You have excellent credit and a good job." Jessica needed a chance to build something for herself by stealing my identity. My voice was rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. "We didn't steal anything," my mother interjected, finding her voice again. "We're your parents. We planned to tell you eventually, and family helps family. You know that." Jessica began explaining the living situation with the casual entitlement that characterized her entire life. She'd been living in the luxury condo for 8 months, enjoying amenities like a rooftop pool, fitness center, and 24-hour concierge service. She made no payments because she assumed I would handle the financial responsibilities. "The condo's really nice, Anton. You should see it. Floor-to-ceiling windows with mountain views, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. It's exactly the kind of place I need to be living if I'm going to meet the right kind of people." She showed me photos on her phone of the unit, decorated with expensive furniture and artwork. There were pictures of parties she'd thrown, with well-dressed people holding wine glasses and laughing in the spacious living room. "Where did you get the money for all this furniture?" I asked. "Oh, there are these great furniture rental places that deliver everything. I just put it on the credit cards." "What credit cards?" My father cleared his throat. "Anton, we need to explain how this all works. Your mother and I have had financial difficulties, and Jessica needed a stable living situation. We've been accessing your mail for about 2 years now." The words hit me like ice water. "You've been what?" My mother produced a key from her purse, the same key I'd given them for emergencies when I first moved to Tucson. "We kept this from when you had that appendix surgery and needed help. You never asked for it back, so we figured you were okay with us having access. They'd been intercepting my mail, including financial statements and pre-approved credit offers. My father admitted he'd practiced copying my signature by tracing documents until he could replicate it perfectly. They even had fake identification cards made with my information but Jessica's photo. We used a guy Robert knows from his old sales job, Jessica said matter-of-factly. He makes really convincing IDs for like $100 each. My mother disappeared into their bedroom and returned with a manila folder containing copies of loan documents, credit applications, and other paperwork. Every signature was a forgery, but they were convincing forgeries. Someone had spent considerable time and effort learning to replicate my handwriting. We've been planning this for a while, my father said with something resembling pride. Your credit was just sitting there doing nothing. Jessica needed opportunities, and you were in a position to help, whether you knew it or not. The folder contained documentation I'd never seen, loan applications listing my employment information, bank statements I'd never received, and even a lease agreement for Jessica's condo showing me as the responsible party. Jessica mentioned additional loans with the same casual tone she'd used to discuss what she had for lunch. A personal loan for $25,000 to start a boutique that never materialized. A business credit line for $30,000 that she'd used for vacations and shopping. Each revelation made the hole deeper and my anger hotter. How much total? I asked, my voice barely controlled. My father consulted a notebook he pulled from his pocket. Well, the original mortgage was for $600,000, but with the home equity line and the credit cards Jessica's been using, I'd say we're looking at close to $800,000 total. $800,000. More money than I'd see in a decade, stolen from my identity and spent on luxuries and frivolous purchases. I thought about my careful budgeting, my brown bag lunches, my 3-year-old Honda Civic that I maintained meticulously to avoid car payments. And you expected me to just go along with this when I found out. We expected you to understand family obligations, my father said sternly. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. This is how children repay their parents. My mother nodded agreement. Besides, you make good money at that plant job. You don't need perfect credit like Jessica does. The twisted logic was breathtaking. They'd stolen my identity, destroyed my credit, and committed multiple felonies. But somehow I was the selfish one for objecting. Jessica looked up from her phone, where she'd been scrolling through social media during our conversation. Oh, and Anton? I'm pregnant. The pregnancy announcement hit the room like a bomb. My parents exchanged excited glances, and my mother immediately started crying happy tears. For a moment, I almost forgot about the fraud as the family dynamics shifted to celebration mode. Pregnant? My mother gasped, reaching for Jessica's hands. How far along? Who's the father? Oh, honey, this is wonderful news. Jessica smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd just played a winning card. About 8 weeks. The father is Derek Thompson. You'd like him, Mom. Has a lawyer. A lawyer, my father repeated with obvious approval. That's excellent, Jessica. A professional man with good prospects. I felt sick watching my family celebrate while $800,000 in fraudulent debt hung over my head. We need to talk about the money situation before we discuss anything else. Anton, my mother said sharply, your sister just announced she's having a baby. Can't you be happy for her? No. I can't be happy when she's destroyed my entire financial life. Jessica's expression hardened. I haven't destroyed anything. I've been building something. Derek doesn't know about the baby yet, but when I tell him, he's going to want to marry me. His family has money, real money. This condo situation is temporary. What do you mean his family has money? The Thompsons own one of the biggest law firms in Phoenix, my father explained. Derek works there as an associate. Jessica met him at some charity event downtown. I demanded to see all documentation related to the fraud. My father reluctantly produced a second folder, this one significantly thicker than the first. The scope of the theft was staggering and systematic. The original mortgage was indeed for $600,000, used to purchase the condo for $590,000 with closing costs, accounting for the difference. But they'd also secured a home equity line of credit against the property for $150,000. Jessica had already drawn down $60,000 of that credit line for furniture, car payments, and what she called lifestyle expenses. Jessica showed me her social media accounts with the same pride Shed displayed about the condo. Her Instagram featured photos from vacations to Hawaii and Las Vegas, shopping trips to expensive boutiques, and meals at restaurants where entrees cost more than I typically spent on groceries in a week. "Derek's been taking me to these amazing places," she said, scrolling through pictures of herself in designer dresses. "His friends all have money, so I need to fit in with that crowd." The Hawaii trip had cost $12,000. The Las Vegas weekend was $8,000. Shed purchased a wardrobe that cost more than I made in 3 months. Every expense had been charged to credit cards opened with my stolen identity. But the real shock came when my father revealed their own financial situation. Head lost his sales job at a medical equipment company 18 months ago and had been hiding the unemployment from everyone, including my mother. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage and had been using my stolen credit to make their house payments. "I've been looking for work," he said defensively. "The job market for men my age is terrible. Nobody wants to hire someone over 55. My mother worked part-time in the accessories department at Nordstrom, bringing home maybe $800 a month after taxes. Her income couldn't cover their basic expenses, let alone maintain their middle-class lifestyle. So you decided to steal from me, instead of downsizing or asking for help honestly." "We couldn't ask you for help," my mother said. "You would have lectured us about financial responsibility and made us feel terrible about ourselves." The irony was overwhelming. They'd chosen to commit identity theft and fraud rather than have an honest conversation about their financial struggles. Jessica revealed more details about her relationship with Derek. She'd been lying to him about her financial situation, claiming she worked in marketing for a successful startup company. The condo was meant to impress him and his family, who apparently lived in an exclusive Paradise Valley neighborhood where homes started at $2 million. "Derek's parents are very particular about who he dates," she explained. "His mother Sarah is on the boards of several charities, and his father William is a senior partner at their law firm. They expect Derek to marry someone from their social circle, so you decided to lie about everything." "I'm not lying. I'm positioning myself for success. There's a difference." She showed me photos of Derek, a handsome man in his early 30s with the kind of confident smile that suggested Head never worried about money. He wore expensive suits and drove a luxury car that made the BMW in my parents' driveway look modest. "Derek's planning to propose soon," Jessica said with certainty. "I just need to maintain the right image until that happens. Once we're engaged, his family's money will solve all these temporary financial problems." The pregnancy was part of this strategy. Jessica believed having Derek's baby would force him to marry her, regardless of his family's approval. Shed already started taking prenatal vitamins and researching expensive private obstetricians in Scottsdale. "What if he doesn't propose?" I asked. "He will," she said with the confidence of someone who'd never faced serious consequences for their actions. "Men like Derek don't abandon pregnant girlfriends. It would look terrible for his family's reputation." My father supported this plan completely. He saw Derek's family as the solution to all their financial problems, not just Jessica's. Once Jessica married into money, she could help them catch up on their mortgage and maybe even help him start some kind of business. "This is all going to work out," he assured me. "You just need to be patient and supportive while Jessica handles the relationship situation." The family had convinced themselves that my stolen identity and destroyed credit were acceptable casualties in Jessica's quest to marry money. They expected me to either fix the financial situation myself or simply accept the damage to my credit and future. What about the $800,000? Even if Jessica marries Derek, how does that solve the immediate problem? "Derek's family will handle it," my mother said with stunning naivety. "Rich people pay off debts all the time to avoid scandal." They'd built an elaborate fantasy where Jessica's pregnancy would lead to marriage, which would lead to financial rescue, which would somehow justify the massive fraud they'd committed. The possibility that Derek might not react positively to being trapped by pregnancy and lies hadn't occurred to any of them. Looking around the living room where I'd grown up, I realized I was dealing with people who'd lost all connection to reality. They'd become criminals and convinced themselves they were just being resourceful family members. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a Starbucks in downtown Phoenix, meeting Derek Thompson for the first time. Jessica had arranged the introduction, telling Derek I was her responsible older brother who wanted to meet the man she was dating. She'd given him no indication of the financial chaos swirling around her life. Derek was exactly what I'd expected from Jessica's photos. Polished, confident, and expensively dressed. He wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary and spoke with the easy assurance of someone who'd never doubted their place in the world. "Jessica's told me so much about you," he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "She's really proud of how successful you are with your manufacturing company." I nearly choked on my coffee. According to Jessica's version of my life, I was apparently a successful business owner rather than an operations manager. She said I own a manufacturing company, Southwest Industrial Solutions, right? She mentioned you started it from nothing and built it into a regional success story. Very impressive for someone your age. The lies kept multiplying. I decided to be direct. "Derek, there are some things about Jessica's situation that you need to know. Important things that affect your relationship." His expression shifted from friendly to concerned. "What kind of things?" I explained the identity theft, the fraudulent mortgage, and the mountain of debt that had been accumulated using my name. Derek listened with the focused attention of someone trained in law, asking clarifying questions and taking notes on his phone. "Are you telling me Jessica doesn't actually own that condo?" he asked when I finished. "Jessica doesn't own anything. Everything she has was purchased using my stolen credit. The car, the furniture, the expensive dinners and vacations, all of it was fraud." Derek's face went pale. "She told me she worked in marketing and had excellent credit. We've been talking about her helping me buy an investment property. She's never held a steady job and has no legitimate income source." For a moment, Derek just stared at his coffee cup. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Dad, I need you to meet me at the office. We have a situation that requires legal advice." An hour later, I found myself in a conference room at Thompson, Hayes & Associates, a prestigious law firm occupying 3 floors of a downtown Phoenix high-rise. The office was all polished wood and leather furniture, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. William Thompson was an imposing man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that comes from decades of courtroom victories. He listened to my story with the dispassionate attention of someone evaluating a business transaction rather than a personal crisis. "This is obviously a serious criminal matter," he said, when I finished. "Identity theft, mortgage fraud, credit fraud. We're talking about multiple felonies with potential prison sentences." Derek looked devastated. "I had no idea, Dad. Jessica seemed so put together, so successful. She's a con artist, son. A skilled one, but a con artist nonetheless." William turned to me with calculating eyes. "The question now is how we protect Derek from any association with these crimes." I assumed he meant helping Derek disentangle himself from Jessica, but William had a different approach in mind. He suggested I sign documents accepting legal responsibility for all debts, claiming the charges as legitimate family loans rather than identity theft. "If you pursue criminal charges, Derek could be called as a witness," William explained. "His relationship with Jessica makes him a person of interest in any fraud investigation. That kind of publicity could damage our firm's reputation and Derek's career prospects." "But I'm the victim here," I protested. "That's debatable. Family financial disputes often involve shared credit arrangements that later become contentious. A prosecutor might argue you willingly participated, but are now having buyer's remorse." William produced a folder containing documentation that made my blood freeze. Photographs of me entering my parents' house, records showing my parents had a key to my apartment, and bank statements showing regular deposits into my account followed by large withdrawals. "We've done some preliminary investigation," he said, matter-of-factly. "Your parents have been accessing your mail and apartment for years. That suggests ongoing permission and cooperation. Jessica has been posting photos of expensive purchases on social media for months, and you never reported identity theft during that time." He was building a case to frame me as a willing participant in the fraud, not a victim. The legal expertise that should have been protecting Derek was being used to threaten me instead. "If you refuse to accept responsibility, well, be forced to report to authorities that you participated in defrauding financial institutions and are now trying to escape consequences by claiming victimization. Derek looked uncomfortable with his father's tactics but said nothing. The pressure from his family's wealth and reputation was overwhelming his personal sense of right and wrong. William continued his threats with the casual tone of someone ordering lunch. Criminal identity theft charges require proving you had no knowledge of the accounts. Given the documentation we've found, that would be difficult to establish. However, if you sign papers accepting the debts as legitimate family arrangements, this becomes a civil matter rather than criminal. You're asking me to accept $800,000 in debt that I didn't create. I'm offering you a way to avoid federal criminal charges. Without our cooperation, prosecutors will assume you're lying about your knowledge of these accounts. The meeting revealed the true character of Derek's family. They weren't concerned about justice or helping anyone. They wanted to eliminate any potential embarrassment or legal exposure for themselves, even if it meant destroying an innocent person's life. William produced additional documents showing Head already contacted the various creditors, suggesting there might be questions about my claims of identity theft. Head poisoned the well before I even knew there was a problem. Derek finally spoke up. Dad, this seems wrong. Anton is the victim here. Derek, you're thinking like an idealist rather than a lawyer. Our responsibility is protecting our family and firm, not playing hero for strangers. I realized I was trapped in a nightmare where the people with the resources to help were actively working against me. William had the legal expertise and financial resources to make my life miserable, while I had nothing but the truth. The meeting ended with William giving me 48 hours to decide whether to accept responsibility for the fraudulent debts or face criminal charges for identity theft conspiracy. He handed me his business card with a sardonic smile. I hope you make the smart choice, Anton. Prison is very unpleasant for people who defraud banks. As I left the law firm, I realized the stakes had escalated far beyond family drama. I was now dealing with powerful people who viewed destroying my life as acceptable collateral damage in protecting their reputation. Derek followed me to the elevator, looking genuinely conflicted. Anton, I want you to know I don't agree with my father's approach here, but you're not going to stop him. I can't. He controls my career, my income, everything. I'm sorry. The elevator doors closed between us, and I knew I was on my own against people who had every advantage except the truth. That evening, I sat in my Tucson apartment researching criminal defense attorneys who specialized in identity theft cases. My savings account, carefully built over 6 years of disciplined living, contained about $20,000. Legal fees would drain that quickly, but I had no choice. Patricia Vegas' website described her as a former prosecutor who now defended white-collar crime victims. Her office was modest compared to Thompson, Hayes, and Associates, occupying a converted house near the University of Arizona campus. But her credentials were impressive, including successful cases against major financial institutions and identity theft rings. When I called her emergency number, she answered personally despite the late hour. I explained the situation while she took detailed notes, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated her expertise. Mr. Thompson is using classic intimidation tactics, she said when I finished. Victims of identity theft cannot be legally forced to accept responsibility for crimes committed against them. His threats are baseless. Patricia's confidence was the first good news I'd received in weeks. She agreed to meet me the next morning to review all documentation and develop a strategy. Her office was cluttered but organized, with case files stacked neatly on shelves and legal texts filling every available space. Patricia was a small woman in her 40s, with graying hair and intense brown eyes that missed nothing. I've dealt with William Thompson before, she said, reviewing the documents Head shown me. 5 years ago, he was sanctioned by the state bar for witness intimidation in a white-collar crime case. He has a pattern of using legal threats to silence victims rather than properly reporting crimes. She explained that Thompson's firm had represented several clients in similar family fraud cases, always using intimidation to avoid publicity and criminal investigations that might embarrass wealthy clients. He's betting you don't have the resources or knowledge to fight back effectively. That's where he's miscalculated. Patricia's investigation strategy was comprehensive. We would gather evidence of the fraud while simultaneously exposing Thompson's unethical tactics. She contacted Detective Maria Santos from the Phoenix Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit, who agreed to meet with us. Detective Santos was a professional woman in her 30s who specialized in complex financial crimes. Her office at the Phoenix Police Department was filled with case files and computer equipment used to track digital fraud. "Jessica Thompson is already on our radar," she said, reviewing my documentation. "Shay's been involved in other fraudulent schemes, including posing as a successful businesswoman to obtain credit cards under false pretenses." This revelation stunned me. Jessica's crimes weren't limited to stealing my identity. She was apparently a career criminal who targeted financial institutions across the Phoenix metropolitan area. Detective Santos showed me files documenting Jessica's previous fraud attempts, fake employment verification for rental applications, forged references for credit applications, even a scheme where Shed posed as a real estate agent to collect deposits from prospective renters for properties she didn't control. "Your case is the most sophisticated we've seen from her, but it fits the pattern. She targets family members because they're less likely to report crimes immediately. Patricia suggested I wear recording devices during any future conversations with my family or the Thompsons. Arizona was a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record conversations without informing other participants. The next day, I returned to my parents' house wearing a digital recorder Patricia had provided. My parents and Jessica were expecting me to announce my decision about accepting responsibility for the debts. "Have you thought about what we discussed?" my father asked as I sat down in their living room. "I've thought about it a lot. I'm trying to understand how my own family could steal my identity and destroy my credit, then expect me to accept responsibility for crimes I didn't commit." My mother started crying. "Anton, we're not criminals. We're your family who needed help. There's a difference. Stealing someone's identity and forging their signature are crimes, Mom. Federal crimes." Jessica was less emotional in her responses. "Look, Anton, this whole situation is temporary. Derek's going to propose. And once I marry into his family, money won't be an issue anymore. Have you told Derek you're pregnant?" "Not yet. I'm waiting for the right moment. But when I do, he'll be excited." Hez mentioned wanting children. I pressed them for details about how they'd accessed my mail and copied my signature. My father described their system with disturbing pride, explaining how they'd intercepted pre-approved credit offers and used my mother's retail job to verify employment information. "Linda knows people in the credit department at Nordstrom. They helped us understand how credit applications work and what information we needed to provide. They'd also been accessing my apartment regularly, not just for mail but to gather additional personal information needed for credit applications. They knew my mother's maiden name, my first pet's name, and other security questions because they'd raised me. The recording captured Jessica admitting to using my credit for luxury purchases that had nothing to do with establishing a stable living situation. Vacations, jewelry, expensive dinners with Derek, and shopping sprees that served only to maintain her fraudulent lifestyle. Most damaging was my father's admission that they'd done this before. We helped Marcus with some credit issues 10 years ago when he was going through his divorce. Marcus was my older brother who'd moved to Seattle and rarely contacted the family. It always assumed he was just busy with his career in software development. After gathering hours of recorded admissions, Patricia contacted Derek directly, bypassing his father's intimidation tactics. She arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a coffee shop near Arizona State University. Derek arrived looking haggard and stressed. "My father is furious that you hired an attorney. He says it proves you're preparing to make false accusations. Derek, your father is trying to frame an innocent person for crimes he knows your girlfriend committed. How do you feel about that?" For the first time, Derek seemed to grasp the moral implications of his family's strategy. "I've been thinking about this situation constantly. What Jessica did was wrong, and what my father is doing is also wrong." Patricia showed Derek copies of the evidence we'd gathered, including recordings of Jessica admitting to fraud and my parents describing their systematic identity theft operation. "Derek, you're a victim here too," she explained. "Jessica has been lying to you about everything. Her job, her income, her living situation, even her pregnancy claims." "What do you mean, pregnancy claims?" I showed him Jessica's social media posts from recent weeks, including photos of her drinking alcohol at parties and a post complaining about her period being late due to stress. There was no evidence she was actually pregnant. Derek stared at the photos for a long time. She told me she was definitely pregnant and had already seen a doctor for confirmation. She lied about that like she lied about everything else. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like someone from Derek's side might actually help rather than hinder the pursuit of justice. Derek made a decision that probably saved both our futures. I want to help you prove what really happened, and I want to distance myself from Jessica completely. He revealed that his mother, Sarah, had been uncomfortable with William's tactics from the beginning. She had been documenting her husband's unethical practices for years, waiting for the right opportunity to expose them. My mother is a good person who's been trapped in marriage to someone who's lost his moral compass. She'll help if we approach her correctly. The investigation was expanding beyond my stolen identity to expose a pattern of criminal behavior involving multiple people. Patricia was confident we could not only clear my name but ensure justice for everyone involved. A week later, I arranged what my family believed would be a final meeting to discuss my decision about accepting responsibility for Jessica's fraudulent debts. The location was my parents' living room, the same space where I'd discovered the scope of their betrayal. What they didn't know was that Detective Santos and FBI agent James Rodriguez were positioned outside the house with sophisticated listening equipment, recording every conversation for federal prosecution. Patricia had coordinated with federal authorities because the crimes crossed state lines and involved amounts exceeding federal minimums for major financial fraud. I arrived to find Jessica, Derek, and William Thompson already seated around my parents' coffee table. Documents were spread across the surface, including papers William had prepared for me to sign accepting legal responsibility for all fraudulent accounts. "Anton," my father said with forced warmth, "we're glad you're here. Mr. Thompson has prepared everything we discussed. Once you sign these papers, this whole misunderstanding can be put behind us." Derek looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his phone and avoiding eye contact with Jessica. Since our conversation with Patricia had been questioning everything about their relationship, William Thompson commanded the room with his usual arrogance. "I trust you've had time to consider the consequences of refusing our generous offer. The alternative is criminal prosecution for conspiracy to commit identity theft. Before I decide anything, I'd like to hear everyone admit what they actually did. For my own peace of mind." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Anton, we've already been through this. We helped ourselves to your credit because you weren't using it. Family helps family. Can you be more specific about how you helped yourselves?" My mother pulled out the folder containing forged documents, apparently proud of their thoroughness. "We practiced your signature until Robert could copy it perfectly. Then we used your mail to find pre-approved credit offers and submitted applications." My father joined the confession with enthusiasm. "The hardest part was getting photo identification with your name and Jessica's picture. But I knew someone from my sales days who makes quality fake IDs for a reasonable price. They were confessing to multiple felonies while federal agents recorded every word. The casual way they discussed crimes that could result in decades of prison time was breathtaking." William Thompson seemed eager to wrap up the meeting. "Now that we've reviewed the situation, let's get these papers signed so everyone can move forward. Actually, there's something I need to tell everyone first." I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it to reveal Detective Santos and Agent Rodriguez. Both wore badges and carried folders containing arrest warrants. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Detective Santos from Phoenix PD and Agent Rodriguez from the FBI. They've been listening to our conversation and recording admissions of federal crimes." The room erupted in chaos. My mother screamed and dropped her water glass. My father jumped up and started backing toward the hallway. Jessica began crying and pleading that she was pregnant and couldn't go to jail. William Thompson's face went from confident to terrified in seconds. "You can't record private conversations without consent. This is illegal entrapment." Agent Rodriguez smiled coldly. "Arizona is a one-party consent state, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Anton had every right to record conversations involving crimes committed against him." Detective Santos began reading Miranda rights, while Agent Rodriguez explained the charges. Robert and Linda faced federal charges for identity theft, mail fraud, and conspiracy. Jessica faced multiple counts of credit, fraud, identity theft, and forgery. William Thompson faced extortion and witness intimidation charges. "Mr. Thompson, Agent Rodriguez continued, "We've also been investigating your law firm's pattern of intimidating victims in financial crime cases. Your state bar sanctions from 5 years ago made you a person of interest in several other matters. The house was searched while my family members were processed for arrest. Federal agents found additional evidence in my parents' bedroom, including fake documents, copies of my identity papers, and detailed records showing they'd been systematically stealing mail from multiple family members for years. Jessica's phone contained text messages with Derek that contradicted her pregnancy claims. She'd been researching pregnancy symptoms online and planning to fake a miscarriage after securing an engagement ring. Derek, who had not been involved in any crimes, was released after providing testimony about Jessica's lies and his father's intimidation tactics. He looked devastated but relieved as agents led Jessica away in handcuffs. "I'm sorry, Anton," he said as we stood in my parents' driveway. "I should have seen what was happening sooner." The most shocking discovery came when agents searched Jessica's condo. Hidden in her bedroom closet were documents related to other identity theft schemes, targeting previous boyfriends, and even random acquaintances whose personal information Shed obtained through social media. Detective Santos showed me files Jessica had been keeping on potential future victims. "Your sister was running sophisticated identity theft operations targeting multiple people simultaneously. This isn't family financial stress. She's a career criminal." My parents were taken into federal custody, still protesting that they were just helping their daughter and that I was being ungrateful. The delusion persisted, even as handcuffs were applied and rights were read. Robert's final words to me as he was loaded into a federal vehicle were, "You destroyed this family, Anton. All you had to do was help your sister." The house search also revealed that my parents had been planning to steal identity from other family members, including cousins and Jessica's ex-boyfriends. They'd collected personal information on dozens of people who'd visited their home over the years. Agent Rodriguez explained that federal prosecutors were confident about securing convictions based on the evidence and recorded confessions. Identity theft cases are difficult when victims wait to report crimes, but your family essentially confessed to everything. "This is the strongest case of its type I've seen." As evening fell and the last federal vehicle left my parents' neighborhood, I stood alone in the driveway where I'd learned to ride a bicycle and played basketball as a child. The house looked the same, but everything about my family's life had been revealed as an elaborate criminal conspiracy. Patricia arrived to drive me back to Tucson, since I was too emotionally exhausted to make the trip safely. "How do you feel?" she asked as we pulled away from the house. "Like I've been living in a lie for years without knowing it." The confrontation was over, but the legal process was just beginning. Federal prosecutors had assured me that restitution would be pursued aggressively and that my credit would be completely restored through the criminal case. More importantly, I was finally free from a family that had viewed my financial future as their personal resource. The betrayal hurt deeply, but the truth was liberating in ways I was just beginning to understand. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom in Phoenix watching my family members receive their sentences. The legal process had been swift once they decided to plead guilty rather than face trial with overwhelming evidence against them. My father received 5 years in federal prison for identity theft and mail fraud. At 57 years old, he would be over 60 when released, his reputation and career permanently destroyed. My mother received 3 years, though her sentence was reduced due to cooperation with prosecutors and her secondary role in the crimes. Jessica received the harshest sentence: 7 years for multiple counts of credit, fraud, identity theft, and what prosecutors called systematic financial predation. The judge noted that her crimes showed sophisticated planning and complete disregard for victims, including family members. During her sentencing hearing, Jessica finally showed genuine emotion, crying as she realized prison was inevitable. She'd lost the luxury condo, the BMW, and all the expensive possessions purchased with my stolen credit. Derek had moved to Denver and blocked her from all communication. William Thompson's legal career ended when he was disbarred for extortion and witness intimidation. His law firm collapsed as other victims came forward with similar stories of intimidation and corruption. He faced criminal charges that would likely result in prison time and professional disgrace. The asset recovery process worked better than Patricia had predicted. The condo was sold, with proceeds applied to the fraudulent mortgage balance. Jessica's BMW and luxury furniture were seized and sold at auction. Even her designer clothing was liquidated to satisfy restitution orders. My credit was completely restored through the legal process, with all fraudulent accounts removed and my score returning to excellent status. The experience had taught me to monitor credit reports regularly and protect personal information more carefully. But the most important healing came through reconnecting with family members I'd lost contact with. My brother Marcus flew in from Seattle for the sentencing hearings, and we spent hours discussing the family dynamics we'd both endured. "I should have warned you," Marcus said over dinner at a quiet restaurant near the courthouse. "They tried the same thing with me 10 years ago, but on a smaller scale. I chose to move across the country rather than confront them." Marcus revealed that our parents had opened credit cards in his name during his divorce, accumulating about $30,000 in debt before he discovered the fraud. Rather than pressing charges, Head quietly paid off the debts and distanced himself from the family. "I told myself I was protecting them by not reporting the crimes," he explained. "But I was really just enabling them to target someone else." We realized our parents had been testing identity theft techniques on Marcus before launching the more sophisticated operation against me. His silence had given them confidence that family victims wouldn't fight back effectively. Marcus and I began building the kind of adult relationship we'd never had growing up. He was a successful software engineer with a stable marriage and 2 children I'd barely known existed. The family dysfunction had driven us apart, but shared experience with our parents' crimes brought us back together. I also connected with Derek's mother, Sarah, who had filed for divorce from William after his arrest. She'd been documenting his unethical practices for years, waiting for courage to act. The identity theft case gave her the evidence she needed to expose his corruption. "I was trapped in that marriage by fear and financial dependence," she told me over coffee. "Watching him try to destroy you for protecting his reputation was the final straw." Sarah became an advocate for victims of legal intimidation, working with bar associations to identify and sanction attorneys who abuse their position to silence crime victims. Her testimony helped convict William and led to investigations of his former clients. The experience taught me important lessons about family relationships and personal boundaries. I'd spent years accepting guilt and obligation for family problems I didn't create, believing that loyalty required accepting abuse and manipulation. Patricia helped me understand that protecting myself wasn't selfish, but necessary for stopping a pattern of criminal behavior. "Enablement isn't love," she explained. "Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in destructive behavior." I began volunteering with identity theft victim support groups, sharing my experience and helping others navigate the legal process. The emotional trauma of family betrayal was common among victims, and peer support was often more helpful than professional counseling. Speaking at community education events about identity theft, prevention became a regular activity. My story was particularly effective because it demonstrated how family members could become perpetrators, challenging assumptions that identity theft only involved strangers. The volunteer work introduced me to people who'd overcome similar betrayals and built healthy lives despite family dysfunction. Their stories inspired me to focus on future possibilities rather than past trauma. A year after the sentencing, I purchased a house in Tucson using my restored credit and savings that had grown during the legal proceedings. The 3-bedroom ranch-style home in a quiet neighborhood represented financial independence and security that no one could steal or manipulate. The house purchase was particularly meaningful because it demonstrated complete recovery from the identity theft. My credit score was higher than before the crimes, and my financial knowledge had grown substantially through working with attorneys and federal investigators. Marcus and his family visited for the housewarming party, along with Patricia, Detective Santos, and Sarah Thompson. It was the kind of celebration I'd never had with my birth family. Genuine, supportive, and built on mutual respect rather than obligation. Derek sent a card congratulating me on the house purchase. Head started working for a legal aid organization in Denver, using his law degree to help low-income families with financial problems. The experience with his father had motivated him to pursue meaningful work rather than profitable corruption. The financial recovery exceeded expectations. Restitution payments from asset seizures totaled over $400,000, completely eliminating the fraudulent debts and providing additional compensation for damages. Federal prosecutors had been aggressive in pursuing recovery because the evidence was so overwhelming. More importantly, Id learned to distinguish between genuine family relationships and manipulative dysfunction masquerading as loyalty. True love doesn't require accepting criminal behavior or sacrificing personal well-being for others' convenience. The hardest lesson was accepting that some people, even family members, will choose destructive behavior over healthy relationships. My parents had opportunities to seek honest help for their financial problems but chose crime instead. Jessica had opportunities to build legitimate success but preferred shortcuts that hurt innocent people. Understanding these choices as their responsibility rather than my failure was crucial for emotional healing. I couldn't have prevented their crimes by being more helpful or understanding. They chose criminal behavior because they believed they deserved what others had worked to achieve. The story concludes with reflection on how the worst betrayal of my life ultimately freed me from toxic family dynamics and taught me the difference between genuine love and manipulative control. Sometimes protecting yourself is the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved, including those who've hurt you. Today, I have real family relationships built on honesty and mutual support. Patricia remains a close friend and mentor. Marcus and I talk weekly and vacation together annually. Sarah Thompson has become like the mother I never really had, offering wisdom without manipulation. The experience taught me that family isn't determined by genetics, but by choosing to treat each other with respect, honesty, and genuine care. My new chosen family is smaller than my birth family, but infinitely more supportive and trustworthy. Looking back, I'm grateful the bank called that Tuesday morning. Without that phone call, I might have spent years unknowingly enabling criminal behavior, while my financial future was systematically destroyed. Sometimes the worst news leads to the best outcomes. The identity theft was devastating, but recovery was possible because I chose to fight rather than accept false responsibility for crimes I didn't commit. Standing up to manipulation and intimidation was the most difficult but most important decision I've ever made. Have you ever faced a situation where family members expected you to sacrifice your well-being for their convenience? How do you balance loyalty with protecting yourself from manipulation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with anyone who might benefit from understanding how family relationships can become toxic and what recovery looks like. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming betrayal and building healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey from victim to survivor. Remember that you deserve relationships built on respect and honesty, not obligation and manipulation. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most freedom, and protecting yourself isn't selfish but necessary for building a life worth living.